Hey, Internet, Eric here. And as you can see, I am not here alone. I am here with one of the coolest guys I've legit met in the last less than handful of years. Podcaster, ring announcer, donut aficionado, your pal and mine, Mr. Germ T Ripper. And Germ, aside from the technical difficulties, I appreciate you sitting down to shoot the shit with me for an hour or so.
Oh, no problemo. I'm happy to be here. But let's do this proper like, okay? It's the G to the E to the R to the M. The T stands for thou, but you already knew that. And we're about to rip it up in a modern way, so you know it's going to be Mr. Germ T Ripper.
That's perfect. Jerm, what I like to do when I start these interviews, I like to introduce the audience to how I came to know the guest. And with you, it was through deathmatch wrestling. I remember specifically, it was my first actual show in person. It was ICW No Holds Barred Volume 30. It was the Ultraviolent Vortex, and I had brought my brother-in-law to the show. What my little thing is, I always like to bring people that have no idea what a death match is to death match shows because that makes it more fun. And I met you because you always stand out in the crowd. You had your I call them the red, white, and blue suspenders. You had those on, and you were, let's see, you were front row, so you were like two rows behind us, and you were probably like the biggest cheerleader when it comes to all the people there, and that's how I got to know you. And that's what I call you. I call you the deathmatch cheerleader because you're a hype man. You always want to bring people in to have fun. And the thing that I remember about you the most, other than just introducing yourself to us and then talking about deathmatch wrestling, is I remember it was during intermission, and what it was a two event show because it was the same place where Ian Rotten was going to have his King of the Death matches, and they canceled, and Danny took over, and it was during intermission, and you were just right next to the ring, talking to a bunch of people, and you were like, "I think I have something in my shoe." You know what I mean? You thought it might have been a piece of glass or something. You pull out a thumbtack, and I just look at my brother-in-law. He's my brother, and he's just like, "What the fuck is this type of show?" And that was after he saw the Ultraviolent Vortex, and since then, I'm like, I got to get to know this guy. So I found you in the deathmatch groups on Facebook, and I'd like to say a friendship was made. And you're honestly not to kiss some butt, but you're one of those guys that I look forward to when it comes to content because you're motivating, you're always having a good time, and that's what you want people to have as well. And it's in this world of doom and gloom that we're sadly in now, whether people like to admit it or not. You are like a breath of fresh air. So I am happy to have you as like a friend and a part of my life. So I appreciate you for that, Jeremy.
Well, Big Eric, I am. I'm happy to be part of your life because you know there were decades of my life that went by where I was consumed by a lot of dark energy. I put out a
Mm-hmm.
lot of negative energy into the world, and people probably didn't realize it because I was in and out of punk rock bands. And punk
Mm-hmm.
rock generally is offensive and generally is, loud and in your face, and that's fine. But a lot of the songs I wrote were about drug abuse, were about alcoholism, were about suicide, were about depression.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, it was in a fun pogo punk style way, but you know, now if I can make people smile, if I can make people laugh, that's my goal.
Mm-hmm.
My goal is to try and promote joy, promote just a feeling of gratitude. If
Mm-hmm.
we can just be grateful for what we have, every day is going to be brighter and more beautiful. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've grown to appreciate you being Facebook friends because whether it's pictures of you and your partner at Disney World or the donut critiques and stuff like that, a lot of times it's just motivational messages. And I've personally told you, like in the captions and stuff like that, if I'm having a bad day, thank you for this. I need that motivation. And what I appreciate about you is you do take that to heart. You're not one of these guys that are just throwing those things out just to make a Facebook post. You know what I mean? I can tell from my interactions with you, whether online or in public, it's genuine, and that's what I like about you. And one thing I wanted to go, how did you go from like the world of punk rock, which is like you said, very negative, um, you've had you've been public with your addiction problems and stuff like that, and congrats on your sobriety. I really am happy with that. How do you go from that to just being this positive guy, because it is tough at times?
Well, it's been a long transformation, to be honest, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of work, but it's worth it. You know, I remember that when I was a teenager
Mm-hmm.
and I was struggling to come to terms with my sexuality, I was very depressed. I was probably on the brink of suicidal tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
And when I discovered punk rock, I was no longer mad at myself. I was no longer angry at myself. Now I was angry at the world.
Mm-hmm.
It was freeing at the time. It saved my life at the time. And that's great. I even wrote a song about it. If you want to look it up sometime, it's called Still Here Today. And
Okay.
it's by my old band, Modern Day Rippers. That's where I get my last name from, Germ T
Mm-hmm.
Ripper. Uh, so if you listen to that song, Still Here Today, it actually talks about how you know, I just tried so hard to fit in. And then once I discovered punk rock and I discovered I don't have to fit in, I can be loud and obnoxious and I can be who I am. Uh, but that angry energy can sort of take over who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And it does so in a way that you don't realize it. It can beat you down to a point where that becomes your entire personality. You wake
Yeah.
up angry, you go to sleep angry, and it's not fun, and I'd rather have fun.
Yeah.
And during that time period, I didn't think I was struggling with addiction. I 100% thought I was in control. I
Mm-hmm.
thought I was in control of my alcohol consumption. I thought I was in control of the substances that I was putting into my body, until I wasn't. Until I wasn't. No, I think it was my 38th birthday. I'd gone to 3 different bars, went to an after party. It was about 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm driving home and I crashed my car into a telephone pole.
Mm.
And before the police could get there, I called AAA, and the tow truck got there before the police did. I mean, I don't know if anybody called the police or not, but
Mm-hmm.
usually that's the case.
Yeah.
um, so I was lucky. I got out of that unscathed. The tow truck driver gave me a ride home, said, figure it out once you wake up. And that should have been a wake up call. That
Mm-hmm.
should have been a wake up call. Instead, all it taught me was to not drink and drive, which is a great lesson to learn, no
Yes.
doubt.
Mm-hmm.
But I was still going out and I was still so proud of myself for taking an Uber or taking a Lyft,
Yeah.
and but still partying really, really hard. I was a binge drinker at this point. So I would wake up without my shoes. I would wake up on my front lawn. I'd wake up, and I'd have to track with my Uber on my phone and be like, what was I doing on the west side? What was I doing over? I have no idea where I was coming from.
Mm-hmm.
It's been pretty scary. It was a couple of years later when my father died, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, the depression inside me was rising up like a fire. And every time I drank, every time I poured alcohol on that fire, it was like pouring lighter fluid onto this fire of depression.
Mm-hmm.
And it was getting to the point where I was going to take my own life.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be a statistic. I didn't want to make my partner sad. I didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
make my mother sad. So I quit then. I quit drinking. I quit partying then. And it was hard. It was really, really
Right.
hard because I was doing it on my own. And, that's kind of like my punk rock ethos was like, I could just do it on my own. I can,
Yeah. I don't
all
need help.
willpower.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't need anybody. I had a lot of people reach out to me and like, if you need anybody to talk to, if you need any help, let me know. And I was like, I don't need anybody. It was about a couple years after that, maybe 4 years after that. No, not 4 years. It was a couple of years after that. One of my coworkers took his own life in the locker room at work,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to go. I started going to therapy, and therapy uh, was going great. I was doing a lot better. I was building a lot of positive mental energy. But when I started going to AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, I can break my own anonymity. I can do that. People say you're not supposed to, but for me, I say the louder I am about my recovery journey,
Mm-hmm.
then maybe I can save somebody else. So, it's a taboo to break your own anonymity, but I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
um, Once I joined AA and I was able to work the steps and I was able to get a sponsor and I was able to, live that life fully, that's when everything sort of clicked. And that's when I switched from a negative point of view, like this sucks, that sucks.
Mm-hmm.
These are things, a lot of things that I thought sucked, a lot of things that I hated were outside of my control. So why waste my energy on things outside of my control that I can't do a thing about? Why get upset about these things? So instead, now I look around and I say the serenity prayer, God
Mm-hmm.
grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change and the courage to change the things I can and the wisdom to know the difference. And that helps. I can look at the blue sky and be grateful for that. I can be grateful that I'm alive another day. And you know what? And with that, I can go online and I can make a silly donut video and hopefully make that person, somebody's Monday morning, that
Mm-hmm.
much brighter because they saw me rub my tummy and say something silly to the camera. And I always have, or I try to have some independent wrestlers on, and either they know the gimmick and they rub
Mm-hmm.
their tummy and they have fun with it, or they don't, and it's even funnier. They're like, what's
Exactly.
going on here? So, I mean, that's kind of the journey. It was just you know, a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of mental health issues that I tried to bury with alcohol and substance abuse. And once I fixed that and I fixed it the right way,
Mm-hmm.
it's a recovery is a process. It never ends, but it's fixed. I know how to control it now. And with that comes that positive energy. It's a transgression. I mean, I don't know if you bought my book,
Not yet. I
Life
will.
Retribution Theory. I don't know if you've read it, but the only story that I wrote while I've gone through the steps and finished it was the very last one. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's why it's so different than the previous 12 stories, is because I'm content. I don't really have any sort of dark, brooding, because it starts off, that first story is all like cutting people's heads off and shitting down their necks.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end, it's just more of like the main character trying to come to terms with reality. And that's something different and something unique, I thought. So, the whole book was a journey for me to write. It took me 5 years to write the damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
uh, so, I mean, it's a personal journey too. So the more you know me, the more you understand what's in that book too. But if you've read it or if you read parts of it, I hope you're enjoying it.
Well, one thing I want to say, Germ, just to pull back the curtain a lot. First off, thanks for being so transparent with that, with the struggles and stuff like that. As a man who himself has his mental health struggles and is knows that the at times the alcohol and stuff like that is consuming him more than it should, if for lack of a better term, your positivity and the fact that you break being anonymous does help. You know what I mean? There is that motivation. Like it's not just the goofy donut stuff. You know what I mean? A lot of times it's just a straightforward. Uh, it's something like you don't fail unless you quit. Those type of things that you've put online. It's just like you're right. Work really fucking sucks today. But what am I gonna do? You know what I mean? I only got 3 hours left. There's no reason for it to hold me down, to get me upset. And just little things that you have done with your little positivity. The pictures of you and your partner at Disney World recently. You know what I mean? You're so happy over Mickey Mouse waffles. You know what I mean? Little things like that will bring a smile to my face. So I do, from Eric to Germ, do want to personally thank you for the positivity that you do share online. And sometimes pulling back that curtain is hard to do for certain people and their personalities, but I really appreciate it. I'm glad the fact that you have done that publicly.
Yeah, I just figured if my mental health and addiction journey can go to help one other person, then it's all worth it.
Yeah. So you started out in punk rock, and then doing a little bit of air quotes research, I saw you kind of went from there to stand-up comedy before you got into your ring announcing. Was that just one of those, like, I think I can do this because I'm good on the microphone, I'm a good bullshitter type of thing, or how did that come about?
Well, for a long time, I wanted to try my hand at stand-up comedy,
Mm-hmm.
and it was I was still in my drinking career at the time, and I had stayed late at work, and my boss had told me, well, I can't give you any overtime today, but as long as tomorrow's quiet, I can send you home early the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I made a deal with myself. I was like, well, if I go home early the next day, I'm going to try my hand at an open mic.
Mm-hmm.
And then he did. And then it went really well. So that was cool to, as they say, kill on my first time out. But then, excuse me, the time after that, I was still drinking and I was still in a band. And I went to my next open mic after band practice, after drinking heavily and practicing angry punk rock songs.
Mm-hmm.
And I get to the venue and I drink more. I don't remember being on that stage, but I do remember the MC of the show calling me the next day and being like, "You're not welcome back here."
Oh no.
Yeah. So I gave that up for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Once I got sober and I had some time under my belt, and I wasn't working any program at the time, uh, I thought, let me try it again. Let me try it again. And hopefully everybody's forgotten about that. Whatever happened, I don't remember what it was.
Right.
Let's see if I can do this sober. And then I noticed I can do this sober a lot better than I can do it drunk.
Mm-hmm.
My phone is dying, so I'm trying to plug this in without losing the feed. Sorry if it gets all jiggly wiggly.
Nah, it's
Okay,
all
it's
good,
plugged
dude.
in. All right.
We'll do it live, like they say. We'll do it live. Take your time.
All right, I'll back up. Can you still hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. But you can't see me. You can't see my handsome face. All right, I'll
There we go.
for now. So then I tried my hand at it sober, and it went a lot better. And
Mm-hmm.
I could remember the night, and I can remember what I did. I can remember the people I met. So I just kept doing it, and I was fortunate that in the short amount of time that I was doing it, I was getting booked at places pretty fast, and
Mm-hmm.
I was getting to meet people that were, kind of influential in the scene. So probably the biggest place that I feel like I played at, that I performed at, was a Laugh Factory in Chicago. Having my
Nice.
face up on the big screen in back of me and Germ T Ripper across it really meant a lot to me.
Uh-huh.
And that was a lot of fun. That was a good time. And but I found that performing at places like in Milwaukee or Indiana
Mm-hmm.
was more fun for me because those crowds weren't so politically correct, and I could just say really offensive things and they would laugh about it and think it was hilarious. So I didn't mind driving that hour and a half, 2 hours to play a show if
Mm-hmm.
I was going to get more laughs. And as long as I got travel expenses covered, I was fine with it. Because I've gotten to the age where I'm just like, I'm too old to work for exposure.
Yeah.
um, and I'm not going to talk bad about anybody, but
Mm-hmm.
I've had several wrestling promotions reach out to me and ask me if I would be interested in ring announcing. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, sure, but I need travel expenses covered.
Yeah.
And once they realize how far I have to drive and what's going on, and it's a few $100s, they're like, oh, that's outside of our budget. I'm like, okay, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever put on a show in the Chicago area and you want me to work it, here I am. But anyways, doing comedy was a lot of fun, but then the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
COVID-19 became a big thing. And once it started letting up, I didn't feel like starting over because nobody remembered who anybody was, and everybody was doing open mics again. And I was just like, I'm tired. I don't want to work my way up again. And by that time, I was looking for a new creative outlet.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I started training with POW Entertainment.
Yeah, that's one thing I thought was kind of neat is how you went from stand up to ring announcing for pro wrestling. Now I know it is different, because you have to have you have to have like your set list and everything that you're going to perform when you do stand up. But it's pretty much similar in my opinion. Like you have to know the stats of the wrestlers, you have to keep the crowd hyped and stuff like that. Was it hard going from something doing stand up where it's a solo show to something like pro wrestling ring announcing where you have, I mean, basically the entrance of the wrestler depends on also how you introduce them to the crowd. Was there a hard shift from one to the other?
Not particularly, because I had originally trained to be a wrestling manager.
Okay.
I'm a little bit older, so the flippy dips and the taking the bumps I wasn't training to do that. Although I did have to learn how to take a bump. I did have to learn a few moves just in case I got pulled into a storyline.
Right.
And so I trained as a manager for a while, which was great. It was a lot of fun, but this was like during a really tumultuous time in Chicago. There was a lot of civil unrest and a lot of protesting, and it was a very stressful time to live in the city. And I just couldn't handle working in the city and also training in wrestling. So multiple times, I had this show in the middle of the matches called Ripper's Room. That was my gimmick for a while, where I would interview a wrestler in between matches. It was kind of like Piper's Pit, like Brutus the Briefcakes. I think it was called like just the barbershop.
The barbershop, yeah.
Yeah, so it was a gimmick like that, and it was a lot of fun. But it was, and it's a job. You know what I mean? This is work. And for me, it just became too much to work in the city, a full-time job, and then work at this too. And I had to stop for a while. And I probably would have stopped for good, but it wasn't this past June. It was the June prior to that. The owner of POW Entertainment reached out to me. He's like, we're going to put on our first Pride show.
Okay.
And we can't think of anybody who would be better for ring announcing than you. And I was like, I can't say no to that.
Right.
So, by this point, I had my shit together pretty well. I had that positive mental outlook. I had that positive mental energy that I was putting out into the world. I was ready to go. And I ordered this nice, it's like a baby pink suit with shorts, matching shorts, a suit coat with matching shorts, or no shirt underneath with a big skull bolo tie, and this leopard print flat cap that I've had since I was 19. And that was the beginning of Germ T Ripper as a ring announcer. And so I've only worked for POW Entertainment as a ring announcer so far. There's a new deathmatch company coming up soon that's going to be putting on their first show in the spring, and it's the only company that has I've told them I need travel expenses covered, and they said sure. And they've also said whatever you need, we can't do this out without you. I'm like, okay. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't want to spill the beans too much before they release anything, because there's been a couple times where people will actually put out flyers or put out promos with me on it, and it fell through. So we'll wait until the spring. But this seems very, very legit. They've got sponsors and everything already. So yeah, I'm gonna keep ring announcing with POW Entertainment, and anybody in the Chicago, Milwaukee, or Northern Indiana area, any place that's within, between an hour and a half to 2 hours drive, no problem. Because I do this mostly just for fun. My rate, as they say, is $30, which is not much, but that's
Right.
because I'm doing it for fun. But if I've got to travel more than 2 hours, I need a little bit more to cover gas and food and whatever else.
That's good, and congratulations on that. I hope it goes through. Were you always a wrestling fan, or because I know you're a deathmatch fan? That's where I met you. Were you always into wrestling, or was it specifically death matches for you?
I wish I could say that I was. It was a kind of a strange evolution. I loved it when I was a kid, like I think most people did, especially of our age. I'm 46. I'm not sure how old you are, but
43.
Yeah, okay, so you're a little bit younger. But I think most of us we were kids during the golden era, So I loved it as a kid, but I remember I think it was like 60 Minutes or 2020, one of those entertainment news shows did an expose on how wrestling wasn't real. And that sort of like crushed my image of it. And I didn't watch it for decades. When people talk to me about the Attitude Era, I don't know anything about it. I'll be honest. I have no idea. And sometimes when I see cringy clips of that time period, I'm like, I'm kind of glad I don't know anything about it. So it was maybe a year or two before the pandemic hit that two of my best friends, Jason and Wendy, were big into wrestling. And I was like, well, if these are going to be my best friends, I got to have something in common with them.
Right.
I was invited over to watch. I think it was like AEW's first, their first pay-per-view, but I can't remember the name of it.
If I'm correct, I think that's the one where Cody and Dustin fought in the main event. I don't remember the actual name of the event itself, though.
But it was like AEW, and then we watched Royal Rumble, and they're like, I'm an addict. So if I like something, I want more and more and more. So of course I start watching on my own. I'm really getting into the storylines and everything. And then the pandemic hit really hard.
Yeah.
And nobody's going out, nobody's doing anything. It was right around my birthday that year. And I text my friend Wendy. I was like, Wendy, have you ever heard of something called deathmatch wrestling? She's like, come over to my house. We're going to watch IWTV. And I fell in love instantly because I love extreme things, punk rock, horror movies, and deathmatch wrestling. And it was, I think I was watching H2O, and I remember seeing Jeff Cannonball and Matt Tremont. And, it's no secret that I enjoy heavyset men. So I was tweeting instantly back when Twitter was palatable, which before Twitter was, super cringy. But I was like, so who's more handsome, do you think, Matt Tremont or Jeff Cannonball? And they're both retweeting it and laughing. And I was like, man, I really like that. I really, really like this. That's when we watched ICW No Holds Barred. And I think it was like number 3. It was really early on in the No Holds Barred, ICW No Holds Barred universe, where Akira and I believe it is Reed Bentley take a bump off of a hotel room.
I think that's volume 2. Yeah.
Yeah. So onto like a pane of glass or a door or something like that. And I was just like, I'm in love with this. This is insane, and I love it. And we bought, I just got really excited about this. And almost every time I see Akira now, I have to be like, it's your fault I love this stuff because you did that. You did that spot off the hotel roof. and we went to our first deathmatch tournament that summer. Me and my friend Wendy. ICW Milwaukee was doing a show, and since like nobody else was doing shows, I didn't even realize it at the time because I was so new to the scene. Everybody was there that was working. That was, and it was crazy to look back at that. And similarly to the show that we watched on IWTV, this time, John Wayne Murdoch and Orrin Veidt took like did a spot off of the railing at a bar onto the hood of a car and like smashed the windshield. And Wendy and I were just like, oh my God, this is awesome. We didn't think we were going to make it out there alive because it was such a cringy bar. It was so weird seeing like a portrait of Ronald Reagan up on the wall. We're like, we thought we're in the middle of a field. We're in the middle of nowhere, but we loved it. And it was so much fun. So at that point, whenever a deathmatch company came through or deathmatch event was within driving distance, I had to do it. We had to go. I think the next time that Wendy and I went to one was in Indiana when ICW was there. That was wild. That was the first time I met Tank, my favorite wrestler. And when he was announced, I got really excited, of course. And but I'd never met him yet. And I joked around. It was even on Facebook. I joked around. I was like, oh, I wonder if I can get a hug from Tank. And Neil Diamond Cutter had tagged Tank in the comments. And he was like, yeah, sure, I'll give you a hug. So, of course, when I saw him, I had to get a hug from my Tanky Bear. And ever since then, it's like if he fights somebody that I really want to see, I'll travel to almost anywhere. You know, this past fall, I went to New Jersey to see him versus the Iceman from England. And that was an amazing fight. One of my favorites I'd ever seen. So, yeah, I have this addictive personality where if I like something, I just want more and more and more of it. I can't do moderation. It's all or nothing.
Yeah, I want to give a big shout out to Tank. I've been a huge fan of him since like the early 2000s, you know, when he was working for Ian and stuff like that. And he's still going. And one thing people, excuse me, don't understand is they see the blood and guts, the tacks, the lights, but they don't realize how much this really is kind of like a family. You know, it's like the Island of Misfit Toys, but it is like this close knit family. You know, with Andy Lawler and Ryan Drinkwater. Everyone, they meet up and have fun. You know, everybody knows you, Germ. We're always yelling at you when you're in the crowd, stuff like that. And it's really cool seeing these wrestlers off the clock. They will go the extra mile. You know, they're tired, they're cut up, but let's take a selfie. You know what I mean? They love and appreciate their fans. One memory I'll always have was the day I met you. It was John Wayne Murdoch's birthday, and we sung "Happy Birthday" to him in the lobby as he was going from the bathroom to the locker room. And it was his heel time. He was just now getting into that heel, and he gave that fuck you look, but he still had that smirk on his face. You know what I mean? The behind the scenes stuff, and that's one thing that I've grown to appreciate, especially going to these deathmatch shows, is just how close the fans really are and how close the wrestlers are with the fans. You could tell it's legit appreciation. And that's one thing, because there's a stigma to it. You know what I mean? There's always a stigma to wrestling in general, but to death matches, there's a really big stigma. And unless you really go and see the interaction, you don't really understand how close, and just they're normal people just like you and I. And that's one thing that I hope people realize. Was it hard for you? Because it going to, I've only been to ICW, No Holds Barred, and I've been to one Ruthless Pro. And it's definitely an experience. There's a big difference watching the glass and everything on TV and then being in the actual event. And you're always front row. I'm always general admission just in case. Was it hard for you to adjust? Like, wow, this stuff's really flying at me type of thing, or anything like that, from television to being there in person? Because it's not for everybody.
Yes. Even though I was drunk and or high during most of my time in my punk rock career, my punk rock life, I did a lot of extreme things. You
Okay.
know, there was one of my shows, one of my most notorious shows with my first band in Chicago. We're called the Rotten Fruits. It was a queer punk band, and we were very outrageous. But this was actually a show during one of my stints of not drinking, and nobody would believe that I was sober during this. But since we were called the Rotten Fruits, I brought a bunch of rotten bananas with me. And this guy that used to pay me to step on his dick wearing boots, he gave me a bottle of like fruit strawberry wine. So I brought that with me. And the band that went on before us, the Functional Blackouts, they had smashed a bunch of bottles on the stage.
Uh-oh.
And I'm standing on the back like, I gotta do better than that. So I bring up this bundle of rotted bananas, and I bring up this bottle of strawberry wine. And throughout the first couple songs, I proceed to take my clothes off, and I proceed to attack the audience with these rotted bananas. And then I'm swinging this bottle of shitty wine over my head and spilling it all over everybody. And then the broken glass that's all over the stage, I'm now stripped down to nothing but a thong. And I leap up into the air and body slam myself onto the broken glass and spin around like Homer Simpson in it. And then there's a big skinhead like staring me down. He's like one of the few people still in the bar. Everybody else is now outside watching from like a big window outside. He's like staring me down. So once again, I leap in the air and I knock him to the ground. And I'm screaming into the microphone, my face right up to his face, about this far away. And so broken glass and people acting in extreme manners does not intimidate me, does not frighten me, does not scare me in the least. If if I was younger, I would probably definitely be taking more of an active role in the deathmatch scene. I would probably train as first a wrestler, because to be a good deathmatch wrestler, you first have to be a good wrestler.
Correct.
I would train as a wrestler fully. And then I would learn the art of deathmatch wrestling. But I'm a little long in the tooth now. I'm 46. And, as it is, I cheer on the guys I want. I'm very vocal. So I lose my voice by the end of the night. I'm tired. And it takes me a while just as a fan to recuperate. So I could just imagine what it'd be like if I was actually taking those bumps onto the barbed wire, taking those bumps onto the carpet strips and the light tubes and everything else. So as much as I'm not intimidated by it, I don't think that I am built to do that. But standing in the front row and cheering on my favorites is something that I love to do. So I will continue to do so. Wear my wacky outfits and have my gimmick of Germ T Ripper and do my donut critiques. And it was funny that you bring up that show though that we met, that it was Don Wayne Murdoch's birthday, because he was my first celebrity guest on Germ T Ripper's Quick Donut Critiques, because it was his birthday. So I brought him a birthday cake donut, and we did that, and he was fully into it. We rubbed our own bellies, then he rubbed my belly, then I rubbed his belly. It couldn't have gone better. And so that was the start of having wrestlers do quick donut critiques with me. And it was funny because I don't think he would have done this otherwise. I don't think he would have. But and he lost that match, and I was, front row, and he was doing one of these. He was like laying sort of like either face down or face away from me. His hand was going out towards me, and he kept sort of like waving me to the ring. And I was just like, I didn't pick up on it right away because I was like, is it me? I was standing right next to a friend of mine. And so I was like, is he waving to me or is he waving to this guy, Big Lee? Big Lee. And I'm like, no, I'm just going to guess and say it's me. So I go over and he rolls out of the ring and he puts his arm around me and I'm walking him out of the ringside to the locker room, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I probably shouldn't go into the locker room because I'm not working the show, but it's really cool to be involved that way. I wish that there was a picture of that time or at least some footage. And I remember when I watched the playback, of course the camera's on. Whoever won that, I don't
I
remember.
think I think he was the main eventing against Cruel at
Okay,
the night show.
yeah. So, but I mean, that was a great time, and I think that John Wayne Murdoch is so popular because he is so fan friendly.
Yes,
And
that's
I think that wrestlers and workers who are fan friendly are so much more over than people that stay in the locker room, people who don't interact with fans online. You know, Dr. Redacted is the number one selling
mm-hmm.
worker on Deathmatch worldwide. And I personally believe it's because he's not only a great worker, it's not only because he's got a great gimmick, but he's personable. You know,
Yes.
he comes out, he runs out, and he's pushing people around and screaming and yelling, whatever the case may be. But he takes the pictures. He accepts the friend request. He goes above and beyond to make sure people are having fun. And I think that that's why Dr. Redacted has become a fan favorite so quickly. Because other people have worked and worked and worked and worked and worked, and they don't get the same recognition. And it's because they treat the fans not as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right about Redacted. Like he's when I started doing these interviews, he's someone I wanted to get on. And again, I'm in my little bubble. It's hard for me to be like, hey, can I do an interview type of thing? Because I know, they got the shoot job, they got this, they're tired and cranky sometimes. And he's just, yeah, I get back from Japan here, so let's do it here. And he was all for it. No payment. We shot the shit for like 90 minutes. And he's just so down to earth because, we talked the deathmatch shit. And then we went it up like doing 45-minute talks on the Muppets. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. And he's so personable. I introduced myself to him the last time I was in Berlin. And again, I'm in my bubble trying to, it was like a 10-second conversation, thank you, stuff like that. But then he made sure to walk past me when he was going to the locker room. I had a Dr. Redacted shirt and he punched me in the chest. He said, "That's a cool shirt, dude." You know what I mean? Little things like that. And Murdoch, I like to order the merchandise straight from the wrestlers if I can. You know what I mean? And there was one time his whole house had gotten sick and he was like 2 weeks late on shipping the stuff out. He's like, "Here's some free goodies." You know what I mean? I got free magnets and koozies and stuff. They don't have to do that because that costs them to make it and then they got to sell it and all that. You know what I mean? So that's what I really appreciate about wrestlers like that because what you see on screen, like I said, Murdoch's the asshole. I don't want to talk to anybody. I hate y'all. But the fact that he had this big grin on his face when he's eating donuts and rubbing bellies with you, that shows that the person behind the curtain. And that's what I don't think people realize unless they follow these wrestlers on social media. And that's a good segue. I want to go into the Monday. It's always Mondays. It always brings me a smile to my face. I look forward to these quick donut critiques from you. Can you just, how did that come about? You can tell people listening and watching what that exactly is.
Well, I mean, I'll be 100% honest. I don't lie. I don't try and put myself over. It's total gimmick infringement. It is 100% gimmick
Okay.
infringement. I started doing Germ T Ripper's quick donut critiques at the same time as Jeff Cannonball's short soda reviews.
Yep. Okay.
Everybody was trying to jump on his gimmick, and everybody was doing their own soda reviews and short soda reviews. And I'll tell you one thing about marketing. I'll tell you something about sales. If you want to steal somebody else's idea, fine, but you got to make it your own. You can't call it the same thing, and you can't do the exact same thing. You know, he was doing soda. Everybody else is doing soda. I'm like, no, that's not how you do it. So I eat a lot, especially at the time when I started it, I eat a lot of donuts. And I was just like, well, I can't call it short donut reviews. Let me call it, what's another word for short? Quick. What's another word for review? Critique. So then it became Germ T Rippers Quick Donut Critique.
You had that little hand movement too. I love that at the end.
So yeah, that's about it, and I did for it was something that I was doing just for Instagram for a while, Instagram and Twitter, because I was on a Facebook ban, and so there was like exclusive content for those streaming features. And then it was when I started like having guests on that it was picking up in popularity. People were like, "What is this? Oh my god!" And I'm doing it with deathmatch wrestlers, people that fans look at as the toughest, meanest people. And like we were saying earlier, you get to know these workers, and they're not tough. They're very tough, but they're not mean. They're not
They're
scary.
teddy bears. Tank's a teddy bear. Yeah.
So just ask them if they'd be willing to do this, and they're like, "Yeah, sure. Let's enjoy a donut together." And it's a lot of fun. It's just a silly fun, and there is sure it may break gimmick sometimes. When you see people that are feared like Schlack. I'm sure people have really negative ideas about Schlack sometimes, but he was fully into the gimmick. He was like, "Yeah, let's do it," and he was like, "Yeah." Woo! I was like, "Yes, that was perfect." These people aren't scary. These people just want to have fun like we do, and I love the deathmatch community. And so bringing Germ T Rippers Quick Donor Critiques into this world, and having people that are looked at as being brutish or being mean, just being silly and having fun, sort of demystifies that on one hand, but also just shows people that sometimes joy, sometimes smiling can really brighten up each other's days. I'm sure the day that I brought John Wayne Murdoch that birthday cake donut, he wasn't expecting that.
Right.
Even though it was his birthday. And I'm sure that at least for that day, it brightened his day. So I'm just happy to be able to bring a different construct, a different angle to the world. And when I go to other promotions and they haven't heard of the gimmick, or if I go somewhere and I suggest it to somebody and they haven't heard of it, that's always just as much fun. But Quick Donut Critique, at its very soul, at its very essence, at the day of its creation, it was just a gimmick infringement.
Hey, you know what? And like I said, it's something I look forward to. So I'm glad, props to Jeff Cannonball for having a gimmick that you can infringe on.
Right? Because it was either that or the fingerboards. For a while, he was posting videos of himself playing with like skateboard fingerboards for a while.
Oh, okay.
And I wasn't going to do that.
Jeff's a lot of fun. He used to do a hot sauce challenge or a hot wing challenge, I think, on his YouTube channel. And I think Matt Tremont like tapped out at the very end type of thing. Like little things like that you don't expect from these guys that are, air quotes, killing each other, for our entertainment. They'll do little fun things like that. Another thing that I've gotten to know about you is you also got into podcasting for a while. The Real Vile podcast. You took over for Madman Pondo of all people. How did that happen? Because I know is it the owners of RPW that are the hosts, or they're involved somehow? Did they reach out to you to get you to take over for Pondo?
Yeah, it was Chris, who was the owner. I was calling him Ruthless Chris on the show, and then his bestie Kelly. They were the hosts along with Madman Pondo, and I think they were calling it Madman Pondo's in the Mouth of Madness at that time. And Peapod was producing it. Peapod, the commentator for Ruthless Pro, and I don't know what or how it happened, but Madman Pondo decided he didn't have time to do the podcast anymore. And I'm very vocal about my thoughts and opinions on different horror movies. And for a long time, I was writing for Daily Grindhouse online. I wrote for
neon splatter for a while. I've written for a bunch of different websites in my spare time. And so when I'm always posting these movie reviews and articles and whatever the case may be, or opinion pieces, I'm sure it probably caught the attention of this horror podcast, Real Vile, which what became Real Vile. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when they like, hey, do you want to do this podcast with us? And I always think that, and nothing against you or other people that have podcasts, but I
Sure.
always was like, there are too many fucking podcasts out there in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to be doing one. But then when somebody invited me to do one, I was like, well, that's a whole different story. They're asking me to be part of their, and then so I did one episode, and they're like, do you want to do this regularly? And I was like, sure. And it was a lot of fun for a while.
Mm-hmm.
We got some guests on, and towards the end, the guests were starting to get bigger, and I remember I have a horrible memory, and I think that was from my years of drinking. But I had the director of Sacrifice Game on, and that took some work. I remember I had to contact her representation at Shutter and answer a whole bunch of questions about what questions we were going to be asking her, so on and
Right.
so forth. But you know what? That was one of the best interviews we ever had. And it was so much fun. I was glad that I did jump through the hoops to get her on because that was a great show. And it was a lot of fun doing that podcast while it lasted. And I know that everybody just has a lot on their plate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this past summer I was taking a course to be certified as an addiction counselor, and
Mm-hmm.
Kelly and Chris were trying to keep the show going without me, and then I came back, and then it got a little bit jumbled for a little while. So as far as I know right now it's done, but it was
Mm-hmm.
fun while it lasted. And I think it's just because I did write for Daily Grindhouse for a long time, and I wrote for Neon Splatter, and my name was out there as a writer and a connoisseur of horror movies that they asked me to join, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, I mean, I still think that's cool. I look at podcasting as just buddies shooting the shit. You know what I mean? And that's it's water cooler talk. You know what I mean? That's what I was saying. It is a lot more fun being the guest. You know what I mean? A lot easier. We can go into horror movies. I won't keep it too much longer, but we'll go into horror movies because that's one thing I love about you. I mean, you got the tats everywhere. I love the Halloween 3 tribute on your belly. You know what I mean? I love that. Can you spit out a top three? You can change tomorrow. Your go-to horror movies, and I know you're not a fan of the Elm Street remake and Terrifier 2. Can you have a bottom three off the top of your head?
Well, I don't put out negative energy into the world, but
Okay.
I will always say that I hate unmitigated vitriol for the 2010 remake of Nightmare on Elm Street.
Mm-hmm.
That, in my opinion, is the worst movie ever made, and I know that that is controversial, just because to anybody's standards, that there are millions of other worse movies made.
Yeah,
I think it's just because I love the original so much
I can get that.
that this remake, with all the CGI and then trying to force this backstory into it that just didn't fit. I saw it once, and I was glad that I didn't get the cameo part I had auditioned for.
Oh,
Once I
really?
saw it,
Okay.
I was just going to be an extra as a police officer in the background. And at the time, I had a full beard, and they're like, "Oh, maybe as a detective," and then I didn't get it, which was fine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I'll shave the beard. They're like, but I was also, when I was at the audition, I was like totally fanboying out because they had the posters to all the movies in the audition area, and I was going on and on about the subtext, which was more of like text in
Mm-hmm.
part 2 about how the whole Freddy Krueger is a allegory for the main character coming to terms with his sexuality.
Yep.
Then I was going on about how part 3 is my favorite because it's very much like uh, uh, like a H. Why can't I think of names? But it's very much like a God. I can't think of his name now, and I feel stupid.
That's
But it's
okay.
very much like a horror comedy where every kill is the punchline to a joke.
Mm-hmm.
Director of Blood Feast.
Oh, Herschel Gordon Lewis.
Yes, it's very much like a Herschel Gordon Lewis film, and so I was fanboying out in the audition, and I'm sure that might be a big part of why I didn't get it. But after watching it, I was glad I didn't get it. Favorites? I don't know about favorites.
Or just go to comfort food movies. How about that?
Comfort horror movies? Well, the original Toxic Avenger, of course.
I wish that remake would come out. I just want to see it with Peter Dinklage so bad.
I want to see it because, I mean, the people who have seen it like it. And there are people that I trust with their opinions. I'm pretty sure that one of the people that have seen it is my good friend Heather Buckley, who is a film producer. And she was the one that urged me to get into writing fiction. And so if you have my book and you've at least read the introduction, I believe, there's an interview with me and her talking about getting me to write fiction. But she was a fan of the remake. And so I value her opinion on movies. And but yeah, the original Toxic Avenger. And once again, I think that corniness, where the kills were punchlines to jokes, the splatter, the gore, the sex, the violence, just it's ridiculous, and I love it. But as far as comfort horror films or genre films, because I don't know if you can even really call it a horror movie.
I know it's not really horror. It's not really sci-fi. It's I would say its own trauma. Sometimes it's just its own genre. You know what I mean? It's not a horror movie. It's a trauma movie.
Yeah, I would say a genre film. You know, if you were reviewing a movie, it's a genre film. As far as comfort movies go, though, it's Ghoulies 2. Because I've always loved Ghoulies 2, even though Ghoulies 3 is the most fun out of the franchise.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a physical release, and it's actually, I think the only place I've seen it streaming on is Tubi, which is fine. But Ghoulies 2 was one of the first horror movies that I ever watched. And the aspect of it that I will continuously go back to and enjoy is that the demons were killing people in front of an audience, and they all thought that it was part of the show.
Yep.
Yeah, and that was the first time I'd ever seen that trope in a horror movie, and I loved it. I thought it was so smart, even at that age. I think I was probably like 8 or 9. And I thought that was so brilliant. So every time that I've seen it since, I always relate it back to Ghoulies 2. I mean, sure, it predated it with films like Wizard of Gore, but that's the first time I remember seeing it. And I just thought that was so smart. And then when they opened up the portal and a giant ghoulie comes out and eats the small ghoulies, I love the fish ghoulie is my favorite. The ghoulie is funny. And I wish that they would put out a Ghoulies 3 collector's disc that is readily available, because Ghoulies Go to College is very funny. But Ghoulies 2 is the best. And number 3, probably, as far as like a comfort, man, it's kind of hard. A comfort horror film that I watch just to chill out. If I was going to do a third, probably Nightmare on Elm Street 3. You know?
That's a good one.
Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors, because that was the first one that I remember wanting to watch. Because of Dawkins. Dream Warriors. And I remember seeing that video as I was a kid. I was like, oh, I could handle watching this. And that was the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie that I saw because I wanted to see it. And I loved it. Just having the punchline to the joke be the kill. I love that. And that's kind of like my favorite sort of trope now. You know, my top 3 movies aren't even really horror movies, though. You know, my favorite movie of all time is the Rocky Horror Picture Show, super fun. And the number 2 is Clockwork Orange.
Yes.
It's super cerebral and it's really smart how violence begets violence. And number 3, Taxi Driver. You know, you can't top those 3 movies in my opinion. And I don't know what it says about me. I know other people, their favorite movies change throughout their lives. Those 3 movies have been my favorite movies since high school.
I get that too. My top 3 have always been the original Crow, and then it goes to 7, you know, Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman, and then it's Predator. You know what I mean? And they're not really similar at all, but they've been my favorites since as long as I could remember. And I'm glad I asked you that this question, because shout out to Ghoulies 2. I'm a big Royal Dano fan, so I loved him in that. Phil Fondacaro from Troll, I loved him, and that's the movie that introduced me to Wasp. You know, you were talking about Doc, and because of Ghoulies 2, I became a Wasp fan. You know what I mean? So I really like that. So, we're gonna wind this down because I don't want to keep it too long. I got.
Well, before
Sure.
we wind it down,
Yeah.
Speaking of Ghoulies 2,
Mm-hmm.
there is a connection between Ghoulies, Garbage Pail Kids, the movie, Troll, and the movie Hereditary.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And this is the only. This is one of the things that if you can discuss this with me, it's like, well, I'll just love you forever. So, the movie Hereditary, the god that they worship, Padman or Padman, something like that, is the same god that they worship in the movie Ghoulies, the original one.
Okay.
Right? And then in Ghoulies 2, there is a painting on the wall of not Ghoulies 2. In Troll, the Ghoulies make a cameo appearance in Troll, the movie. And you've seen Troll because you mentioned it.
Yep.
So the Ghoulies make a cameo in Troll, right? And in Troll, there's a painting on the wall of the heroine, the wizard, the witch lady, and the king of the trolls, the troll, before he becomes a troll. And that painting makes a cameo in Garbage Pail Kids the movie.
No shit.
So that's the connection between Garbage Pail Kids the movie and Hereditary.
Wow. I've never thought, like, I was going to the old standby, you know, Phil Fondacaro, who he's the little person, the actor who was the troll in Troll, and he's also one of the actors in Ghoulies 2. Wow. That's that's a connection that I never would have thought of. Garbage Pail Kids and Hereditary and all that stuff rolled into one. That's all right. You kind of blew my mind with that one. That was actually kind of fun. Now I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch Ghoulies 1, which is probably the one I've seen the least.
Yeah.
And then Garbage Pail Kids, which I probably haven't seen in 20 years. So
well, the one that I've seen the least, because I don't think I've ever seen it, is Ghoulies 4. I don't think
I haven't either. I haven't either.
Streaming anywhere. I don't believe that it's a physical copy anywhere. I think that peace would be brought about the world if Ghoulies 3 and 4 were available for us to watch on a regular basis.
I love it.
So the only other thing besides my connection between Garbage Pail Kids the movie and Hereditary is if you've seen Toy Story 3 and you can liken it to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, we're going to be best buds forever. It's a survivalist film at its core.
Oh, it is. It is.
It's a survivalist film.
That's, you know what? I was already happy that we were having this interview, Germ, but now with these last 2 subjects, I'm really happy that this has actually been quite fun, you know, thinking that. Well, I always ask these last 2 questions of all my guests. And let's just say you've got the house to yourself. Dogs aren't driving you nuts. You know, partner, he's gone for the weekend. You don't have to work. You're feeling nice and chill. What does Germ T Ripper do to just relax and veg? Like, what would be your perfect weekend?
Are you sure you want to hear about this?
Go ahead. I ask everybody.
I'm just watching I'm probably just watching pornography with fat, hairy guys having sex with fat, hairy guys
Hey,
and sleeping.
there is absolutely nothing wrong with that.
A lot of fat guy porn.
You've heard it here first. Now
Left to my own
here's
devices, fat guy
yeah,
porn.
nothing wrong with that. Like I've always said, everybody's got a kink. You know what I mean? And then the last question I like to always ask people is, it's a little dark, but you know it's your last day on Earth. What would Germ T Ripper, no limits, Germ T Ripper's final meal be? Now I've had people like go the whole spiel, appetizer, yada yada yada. But then I've even had Madman Pondo on. He said he'd be happy with like stovetop stuffing and a Dr. Pepper. You know what I mean? So what would Germ T Rippers off the top of your head? What would your final meal be to comfort you?
Well, it's interesting because until I went to Disney World, I would have definitely have said something to the effect of, going to my favorite restaurant, which is Elwood's, right near my house.
Mm-hmm.
I love their food. I love their ambiance. But a couple of weeks ago for Christmas, Ken and I, my partner, we
Mm-hmm.
went to Disney World, and it was my first time going there. And he planned out everything. He made an amazing event, and it was the best time of my life. But on Christmas night, we went to this restaurant in the boardwalk area called the Flying Fish.
Okay.
And the food was so good, it literally made me cry. So if I was going to have a last dinner, I would want to go to the Flying Fish. And it was we had ordered the pork belly.
Mm-hmm.
2 bites into it, my eyes were swelling up with tears of joy. It made me so happy to eat this little bite of meat. It was so well prepared and so well seasoned that it brought me so much joy that it brought tears to my eyes.
That's
And
awesome.
when I had ordered my main course, this is basically a steakhouse, basically a seafood restaurant. And I'm looking at the menu. I'm like, I've had filet mignon, I've had T-bone steak, I've had everything listed here except for the vegetarian dish. It was like a shiitake mushroom prepared this way and that way. I can't remember all the details, but I'm like, I've never had that. I like new things. I love trying
Mm-hmm.
new things, and I love stepping outside of my comfort zone.
Right.
So I asked Ken, I was like, do you think it would be weird to order a vegetarian meal at a place that is ideally a steakhouse? He's like, do what you want. And I was just like, so I ordered it, and it was unlike any texture or flavor I'd ever tried before, and it was so delicious. So if I was going to have a last meal, I would probably, I wouldn't say order the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
but I would make sure that I had a meal at the Flying Fish on the boardwalk at Disney World, because I've never had food elicit so much joy in me that it brought me to tears. And I want to experience that again. And if it was my last day on Earth, my last and final meal, we'd have to get a meal from the Flying Fish.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. Well, Germ, it's been a blast. It's been a blast actually talking to you for over an hour, because there's been times when we've seen each other at the shows and it's 5 minutes here, a selfie there type of thing. So I appreciate you taking the time out to shoot it with me. Is there anything you need to promote or any shows you're gonna be at? I mean, I know you don't want to jinx anything with the one show, but or just be there as a fan. I know I'm gonna be at the Chicago show for ICW in April. I got my ride and I got my new victim, I guess you would say, who has no idea what he's getting into. Anywhere else we can see you, or any links you want to promote your book?
Definitely be there. I'll definitely be there. And I'm kind of hoping that Danny, maybe I'll have to send him the link, because there's one match that I know that both of these wrestlers want to happen. I want to see Tank fight Tim Strange.
That would be
I know
good.
Tim Strange wants to fight Tank, and I know Tank wants to fight Tim Strange. And I want to see that happen, and I'd love to see it happen in Chicago.
Yeah.
So I will definitely be at the Chicago show. I have tickets for We Love Wrestling, is they're doing their first deathmatch tournament, and they're doing it at Berwyn Eagles Club. So I have
Mm-hmm.
tickets for that. So I'll be there for that. besides that, I have the new promotion in Wisconsin that has me tentatively booked as their ring announcer. And I don't have anything booked with anybody else right now. Other than that, if you want to buy my book, The Lilac Retribution Theory, it's available on Amazon or through St. Rooster Books, who published it. Or if you want to, you can even send me 20 bucks, and I will mail you a signed copy directly from myself. Um, but I'm always promoting something. I can't not be busy. Although right now I'm content to just spend time with my husband, spend time with my two puppy dogs, Hank and Patty. Their cuteness overload, and they're taking over the internet. Like, my shirtless selfies used to blow up my Instagram, and now it is pictures of Hank and Patty. Everybody just wants to see Hank and Patty, and that's fine. Good. Whatever it is. We took them to their first vet visit today, and everybody at the vet were excited to see them. They're like, "Oh, the puppies! We knew the puppies were coming in today." And I'm like, and people keep calling Hank a boy. They're like, he, him. I don't care about pronouns, but it's like, well, it's actually short for Henrietta. It's Hank, because we were going to get a boy and a girl, and I always name my pets after musicians. So Patty is named after Patti Smith, and Hank is named after Henry Rollins. But then we didn't get a boy. I'm like, we'll just tell people it's Henrietta.
That's awesome. Well, Germ, I kept you over an hour. We had technical difficulties, but I appreciate you sitting here and just, pulling back the curtain. I appreciate you for the real personal stuff. And like I said, it does help more than you realize. So I thank you for that, and keep that journey going. And I just appreciate you being you, man. You really are, like I said it before, you are that positive light sometimes that we do need. And I really appreciate you putting that out there, publicly on social media for all of us to see. And this has been a lot of fun tonight. So I really appreciate you doing this.
All right. Thanks, Eric. I really appreciate it.
Yep. So with that, I'm Eric. That's Mr. Germ T Ripper. He's everywhere, whether he's watching you or not. He's there. And we'll see you in the next one. Take care, everybody.
All right. Keep it sexy. Ow!